So what actually happens at the end of Loki Season 2? We know that Loki takes all of the dying branches of time and stops them from dying. And he's now sitting on a throne at the end of time, holding the multiverse together, which now resembles Yggdrasil, the world tree. But how did this actually happen, and what the fuck does it actually mean?
Language.
That's what we're going to talk about in this video, and using the powers of being a gigantic freaking nerd, I'm going to try to pull all of these loose threads together, reference the comics, and explain what I really think is going on here with Loki at the end of Season 2, and how I still think he will return at the end of the multiverse for Secret Wars. So there's a couple of really weird things that happen in Loki Season 2, but the main thing to keep in mind for understanding what is happening with Loki is the fact that he himself does a lot of time traveling in Season 2. And this begins with the time slipping from Episode 1. Ever since he gets kicked out of the Citadel at the end of time, going through a Tempad portal, he is slipping through time. And he's not just slipping through time, he's slipping through time in an impossible way. And the first hint that this is happening is with the crack in the floor. This crack was not here in Season 1. This shows us that Loki's time slipping is causal in nature, basically more Back to the Future than Avengers Endgame, and it's also happening in a place that is supposed to be outside of time completely. And while we never get an exact explanation for how Loki is doing something that is seemingly impossible, we do get it explained in the finale that He Who Remains paved the road for Loki to be able to do this.
And who do you think paved that road?
He Who Remains.
Now, what's interesting to note here is that this implies that He Who Remains not only created a looping past to his own death, but he also created a looping future, the literal outcome of Loki returning to that moment in time and having to face the hard choice. And it's implied in this scene in the finale that Loki realizes this. He Who Remains says this outcome remains the same. You lose. And a defeated Loki says, I know, before looking over at an equation on a chalkboard and realizing that he can actually change the equation completely. But what's weird is we really have no idea how many different times Loki has tried this conversation and tried different versions of changing the outcome. This loop in the future that again is created by He Who Remains and the Tempad actually causes Loki to live damn near infinite time, which we know is at least causal to his own experiences. Somehow He Who Remains knew that doing this to Loki with the Tempad would allow him the ability to somewhat master time travel. That is how he knew it would loop and bring Loki back to this conversation. He Who Remains is also aware that Loki would have the ability to stop time in the same way that He Who Remains can with the Tempad.
Oh, come on, you're not telling me you haven't learned how to pause time?
And what makes you think this is the first time we've had this conversation?
And by the way, this stuff all works on a story level. I think the finale to Loki is fantastic for the character arc of the Loki character, but the super nerd within me is trying to make sense of it all and figure out how it's even possible. And I think there are a few subtle clues in the episode that actually do explain this. The first clue is classic Loki from Season 1, played by Richard E. Grant, and the parallels to this scene here with Loki's actual new Asgardian costume and the horns coming out and all of that, to this scene where Richard E. Grant is literally shouting glorious purpose as he's holding up his hands. Yeah, the similarities between these two scenes is intentional. In Season 1, when Loki sees classic Loki doing this, he remarks that they are more powerful than they thought, talking about Loki's.
I think we're stronger than we realize.
Now, this made me think of something from the Infinity Gauntlet story, the actual OG story with Thanos in the comics. Because there's a moment in that story where Thanos uses the time stone to make everybody that's attacking him grow really, really old. And Thanos thinks he's really clever until he discovers that when you age an Asgardian, they get even more powerful. And so this now really old version of Thor actually like lands a blow on Thanos. It's really crazy. This implies that Asgardians get more powerful over time, which seems about right for what we see in the MCU as well, as all of the Asgardian characters do seem to be getting more powerful, and Odin, who was really freaking old, is probably the most powerful Asgardian that we've seen so far. But I know what you're saying. Loki's not a true Asgardian, so why would this actually work for him? There is actually an explanation. Did you know that there's a canon reason as to why Loki looks human in the TVA instead of in his frost giant form? Because Loki's actually a frost giant, right? And we even see in the What If episode that has Thor partying and there's Loki that he looks like a frost giant, and the TVA actually stops magic from working. So a lot of fans are like still confused, like why does Loki look human in the TVA if it stops all magic? Well, this is because Loki's appearance was permanently changed by Odin. This is actually in one of the source material books, like I forget which one exactly, but there's a book out there that explains in no uncertain terms that when Odin touched baby Loki, he actually transformed his appearance to make him look like an Asgardian. And so it's possible some all-father magic is like just permanently placed upon and inside Loki. So in my mind, the show is hinting that Loki is just getting more and more powerful the longer he is alive. And at this point that we see him in the finale of season 2, he has been around for eons and eons. He has possibly even lived longer than He Who Remains. He has certainly mastered his ability to manipulate time, freeze it, turn it around, and stop it. And despite all of that power, he can't change the inevitability of the future loop that was created by He Who Remains. But I think another thing that the show is trying to tell us is that this crazy power that Loki now has is connected to this material from the Citadel at the end of time. This material is what the Tempad is made of that He Who Remains actually uses at the end of time. It is how he sends Loki into time slipping. And we can also obviously see that material on the crown of Loki as he walks out towards the loom. And we even see that as he's stepping to the Citadel at the end of time, the gold around it is changing and forming with him and helping to create that throne, possibly further powering Loki to do what he needs to do. Now, the way this gold was moving, and it even sort of flows throughout the timelines, which is really interesting, but it all reminded me of the World Forge scene in Eternals, where Cersei's consciousness is taken to the actual place where she was created. And so I think there is a visual tie there. I think it's possible the Celestials will be the people that created the entirety of the multiverse in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and perhaps the Citadel at the end of time is something ancient that the Celestials created. It could be some kind of celestial technology. I mean, we have seen a lot of celestial imagery put all over things like the 10 Rings or even the temple on Wundagore Mountain where Wanda shows up. And so I think this material is also something that gives Loki extra power in order to be able to hold the multiverse together. By the way, I actually still think this material is the God Quarry from Marvel Comics. The God Quarry is this thing at the end of time that has immense power. It also has some kind of consciousness. In some big cosmic Thanos books where he's rewriting reality, he actually arrives at the God Quarry through a black hole. And the God Quarry also brings Avenger Prime Loki to it and empowers him and gives him his new mission after he tries to kill himself. So that's basically what I think is happening. I think this Loki we are seeing in the finale is a combination of Avenger Prime Loki, of God of Stories Loki, and even this character of Atla, who Rob from Comics Explained was talking about on Stream With Me on Friday. This was a character created by Jim Starlin, who is essentially a custodian of the multiverse that just kind of sits in a chair somewhere off the map from the entire omniverse. And this character's sole job is just to sit there and hold the multiverse together until its natural end would come. And so I think this Loki is there at the end of time, on the throne, on the Citadel at the end of time, using the power of the God Quarry and his own crazy powers as an Asgardian god that has been alive for eons. And he's holding the multiverse together in the form of the World Tree, just giving everybody a little bit more time as the inevitable destruction of the multiverse still takes place. Because Avengers Secret Wars is absolutely still going to be a film that takes place after the destruction of the entire multiverse. That's just what makes sense. That's what insiders and scoopers are talking about. And I say all of that to say that I don't think this is the last time we're going to see this Loki. I think this Loki is going to have to sit there for a long time for him and a long time for fans, as Marvel keeps delaying more and more movies, and it's looking like Secret Wars might take place in like 2030 now. But I think when that happens, when the entirety of the multiverse is finally and actually destroyed by the incursions which are set off by the tinkering of the Council of Kangs, I think this Loki will be able to then stand up and go to Battle World and perhaps be a formidable force in fighting against Beyonder Kang. One of the things that's exciting about this is we have heard that there's going to be a version of Kang that essentially becomes the Beyonder. And when I first heard that as a comic book fan, I was just like, that doesn't make any sense, because Beyonder Kang would just destroy and wipe every person we've seen in the MCU so far. Maybe Wanda, with the power of all the chaos magic and the Darkhold, would stand a chance, but I still kind of believe a Beyonder Kang would treat her like a bug. He would literally just squash her. But now that we've seen this God of Stories, Avenger Prime, custodian of the multiverse version of Loki, we have a character that is powerful enough to actually give a good fight to a Beyonder level Kang. And I'm going to talk more about this in other videos, but it's very possible Marvel is building up several different versions of classic MCU characters that will have some kind of wild power scaling, and they will actually be used to help fight against this Beyonder Kang, and that would be super cool. So there you have it, guys, a super nerdy, super sweaty explanation for what really happened at the end of Loki Season 2. I thought it was absolutely dope, and I think the theories moving forward are going to be super fun. So let me know what you think about the finale. Do you think I'm onto something? Do you have your own theories? Let me know in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.